The following program is brought to you in part by the film Backdoor Channels, The Price of Peace.
Hi, I'm Leon Charney. This is the Leon Charney Report. I'm sitting here with Mayor Teddy Kollek, probably one of the best known Israelis in the world, irrepressible in spirit, and a man who has absolutely united Jerusalem. Teddy, welcome to the show. You don't mind if I call you Teddy, but every Israeli...
Nobody else calls me anything else. I would be insulted if you would call me everything.
You call me Mr. Kollek, you know? No. You have come to New York and basically to the United States at a very interesting time, and you as a mayor of a city, what's your feelings for Mayor Bradley today in Los Angeles?
I can only commiserate with him. It must be a terrible feeling. Here, a city that is on the whole regarded as a paradise to which people want to come from all over the world, and it's suddenly parts of it going up in flame, and all over the world you have an even much exaggerated picture of what's happening. I feel that very much because I know if a tiny little thing happens in Jerusalem, it's all over the world a very exaggerated picture. So in this case, the same thing. He must be in a very sad condition.
When you saw the pictures of this in Israel, you were in Israel when this happened, the general feeling amongst the public in Israel, I assume, I spoke with our friend Asa Weitzman, and he said to me, am I safe in New York on 42nd Street? He was worried about me. There's some kind of, there's a feeling amongst the Jews that said, you know, everybody's worried about coming to Jerusalem, everybody's worried about coming to Tel Aviv. It's not so bad. I mean, should people be afraid to come to Jerusalem if this is going on in America?
Had nothing to do with it. I think it will break down this barrier of fear because people will suddenly see what's happening somewhere else. But the fear was never justified. You know, I'll speak about something very gruesome, about the rate of crime in Jerusalem. We have an average of 1 person killed a month. In a city of 570,000 people, with all the problems of tension and difference, not only Jews alone, of 104 different cultural backgrounds who are still quarreling with each other, and it will take a generation or two until they gel, although you can measure the progress very visibly. 40 different Christian denominations that are not always on good terms with each other, and sometimes you have within the various denominations, let's say within the Armenians, you have those who are on the left and those who are on the right, and who are fighting with each other. And with all this, we have, of course, 130,000 or so Muslim Arabs, also not all of one origin, and all this together, and it's a quiet and pleasant city. Cities, multi-cultural cities today are the rule of the day. There are no more homogeneous cities. Maybe in some corners of France or in some distant corners of Scotland. London isn't, and Manchester isn't, and Paris isn't, and Marseille isn't. And in all these cities you have tension, and here in the United States certainly it's, and you are at it already for 200 years or more. We are at it only for 40 years, and in the United Jerusalem exactly 25 years. It's a long-winded process to get people to learn to live together. And we have to know that and not to make too many demands. But as it goes, Jerusalem is a quiet and pleasant city with parks and gardens and schools and museums and synagogues and churches and mosques. You had 200,000 people praying on the Temple Mount at the Ramadan holy Muslim months, and you had Easter for the Western Christians and for the Eastern Christians 1 week after the other, and it went off beautifully well. And mainly you had Passover. That is always a time when it goes well. But here all this at the same time, and no particular difficulties. We have a car burn, and I don't want to paint too rosy picture, and we have a stone thrown, and sometimes a window pane of a car is broken, and somebody is slightly hurt, and the police makes a great fuss of it, and the people say, well, he has been hospitalized for about 20 minutes until he got a bandage, but he was hospitalized. Here you had this terrible thing happening, and I think it will put the measure into the right measure. It will have the right proportions.
I saw something very interesting the last time I was in Jerusalem. By accident, I was there, and Menachem Begin died, and I went to cover his funeral for our television show. And it was very quickly done, as you remember. I mean, it wasn't a big thing, and it wasn't a state funeral, and the family didn't want it. But I saw...
But it was a very big thing.
Tremendous.
In numbers, tremendous.
Tremendous outpouring. And I even saw a lot of Arabs out there. And we interviewed some people, and there was enormous respect for Menachem Begin. It was something that I have never seen in my life, the most spontaneous... it was a spontaneous feeling for a man who brought peace and started on the other side of the coin.
Well, it shows you how strong the longing for peace is. I think people are on the whole quite critical of Begin. He created some tensions within the community. He played on the tension between Sephardim and Ashkenazim, and there were other things that people criticized. It all vanished against this importance of having made peace with Egypt. And even there, of course, the great number of people don't know about this, but he gave it his strengths. The real ideas came from Moshe Dayan, to a certain extent, from Asa, from others. Without them, this would never have come about. When it came to it, he had the strengths to grasp the situation and take on responsibility. And peace is the one thing that we most need and most desire.
The one thing you got to remember Begin for, and I was part of that Camp David process, is that when he had to give the order to take away Yamit, he did it, and that was very painful to him, very, very painful. But he did it. So he
this is what I'm referring to.
He was a classical political person who transformed himself to a statesman. Teddy, you've met thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of people. Personally, some of the more interesting people in your lifetime that you've met, the most fascinating man in your life, who you consider a role model.
Well, of course, I may be prejudiced, but for me, the greatest Jew in our time was Ben Gurion. Without him, we wouldn't have the state. Not because we weren't ready to build the state or declare the state. There was great opposition to this. There were people who were afraid of it. There was a cabinet meeting at the beginning of May, and Moshe Sharet came back with the good advice of Marshall and others not to declare the state now, because all the Arab countries would be against us and there would be a war. And Ben Gurion had the appraisal that this was the one occasion in history which may not reoccur. And he took the decision. I think it was the most important decision maybe in centuries. This is how we got the state. So, but I think generally he was a modest person, and you know, you don't find them anymore this way. He was interested in philosophy and in religion. So he learned Greek in order to read Plato, and he learned Spanish in order to read Spinoza, and he was interested in Buddhism because he thought it was the most clearly thinking least encumbered with all kinds of mythology of religions that existed. And here an active prime minister went for a month into a Buddhist monastery in Burma. Can you imagine here a president or anywhere a prime minister or so doing this nowadays? And so he was a very attractive person. He wasn't an easy person, and he didn't make it easy for his colleagues. And
you served as secretary for how long, Teddy?
I served as director of the Prime Minister's office for 11 years.
11 years, with Ben-Gurion.
With Ben-Gurion.
We're going to hold for a commercial break and come back with the irrepressible Teddy Kollek, the mayor of Jerusalem, one of the fantastic men of the world and world-renowned. Don't leave us.
In modern Middle East history, only one peace treaty has stood the test of time, the 1978 Camp David Accord. In the new documentary film, Backdoor Channels, The Price of Peace, learn the true story behind the greatest diplomatic achievement of our time and its lessons for the future.
The price of peace is very high. To have this courageous man and my close friend killed.
Winner of the Telly Award for Best Cultural Program. Now available at select stores including Barnes & Noble and online at Amazon.com. Now get the book the hit movie was based on, Leon Charney's Backdoor Channels. Learn about the backdoor channel negotiations that led to the historic 1978 Israeli-Egyptian peace treaty. Become a witness to history and order Backdoor Channels online at Amazon or Barnes & Noble. Also available at all other retailers and booksellers. Or download the audiobook at iTunes or Audible.com. Relive history. Order Backdoor Channels. Get best-selling author Leon Charney's latest book, The Battle of the Two Talmuds. Join Charney as he explores years of Jewish history to find out why and how Talmudic scholars and rabbis abandoned the Holy Land for the lands of the diaspora. Learn about the power struggles behind the creation of the Jerusalem and Babylonian Talmuds. It's a book critics call engaging and enlightening. A book which will be of interest to people of every faith. Now available at Amazon and Barnes & Noble, or download the audiobook of The Battle of the Two Talmuds at iTunes or Audible.com. Leon Charney sets out to discover the true meaning of the Kaddish, the Jewish custom of reciting a prayer to commemorate the death of a close relative. Join Charney as he finds out the history of the Kaddish and how it has evolved. Reviewed as a refreshing walk through Jewish history and a book that deserves to be read by both Jews and non-Jews, The Mystery of the Kaddish is now available online at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and all other retailers and booksellers. Or download the audiobook at Audible.com or on iTunes. Discover The Mystery of the Kaddish. Available now over iTunes, Amazon, and Google Play. Leon Charney's cantorial CD and Disco Lam. Listen as Charney movingly sings El Moleh Rachamim and Charney's amazing rendition of a disco remix of Adon Olam, all sung in the incredible and individual Charney style. Also listen to the CDs on Rhapsody. Download Leon Charney's cantorial songs and Disco Lam, the disco remix of Adon Olam on Amazon, iTunes, and Google Play. Or listen in on Rhapsody. All available now.
We're back. We're talking with Teddy Kollek, the mayor of Jerusalem for quite a number of years, the man credited with keeping peace in Jerusalem and bringing sort of a homogeneous society there with a lot of different viewpoints from a lot of people. You don't agree?
You're exaggerating.
Really? But that's my tendency. So that
no, I mean the world is exaggerating as well. We have achieved a great deal in
Teddy, I don't fight with my people on a show, but I got to differ with you. You are synonymous with Jerusalem, people all over the world.
But we haven't yet achieved peace in Jerusalem. It's still a far way off.
When I was in Bahrain a year ago doing Passover shows as a Jewish boy with about 6 Jews in Bahrain, the man they spoke about mostly and the symbol that they talked about mainly was Teddy Kollek, whether you like it or not.
Who, the Arabs?
Yeah. Continue.
Well,
in your city, you're the boss. In this city, I got a few words to say.
I bow to you.
Uzi Narkis told us a couple of weeks ago, we did an interview with him, that I think he gave you a call and told you we're about to have...
That's true.
Were you prepared for that, Teddy?
Well, I knew at that hour...
There's a '67 war where Narkis was central commander of the Israeli Defense Forces and Teddy was the mayor of Jerusalem and he was about to become the mayor of the greater Jerusalem and he had to get prepared. It's not so simple.
Well, the background is that we warned Hussein not to attack us, and if he wouldn't attack us, we wouldn't attack him, and the city, of course, would have remained divided. When Uzi phoned me, I already knew that the Egyptian Air Force had been destroyed. an hour earlier. And so while I wasn't certain what the Jordanians would do, what they in fact did, a few hours later in the middle of the day when all the children were in school, they attacked because they thought they could still relieve the situation in Egypt. And they were under pressure from Nasser. But I was already half and half expecting that the Jordanians would withdraw, and then of course the city would be united. So while this was a very welcome telephone call, and while Uzzah took a great risk of prophecy, and the prophets have all died in Jerusalem, they are not there anymore, I had an inkling that it might happen.
Teddy, when the wall was reached and it was recaptured, the Wailing Wall, I assume you went down as quickly as possible, and what was your emotional reaction? How did you feel as a Jew after 2,000 years?
Forgive me, I'm a very practical guy.
You forgive
me.
The
area outside the Wailing Wall was as wide as the Rerun. Maybe there could be 50 or 60 people there. I knew that in a few days it would be Shavuot, the day on which the Jewish people got the Torah, the Ten Commandments, in the times of Moses. There would be great numbers coming, and we had to create an area there. And the whole, what is now the Wailing Wall Plaza, the Western Wall Plaza, was stuck with some huts, adobe huts, not houses, temporary housing that had been put up by an Algerian foundation, and there were about 106 such huts there. And I knew if those wouldn't come down, there would be no room for the Jews. Not then, not on Yom Kippur, not on Tisha B'Av, on the day of mourning after the temple. So my feeling was, what do I have to do now before anybody interferes, before the Israel government interferes, before the world interferes? Let's do something. And that very night, after consulting with one or two people, we started creating that big plaza. And a week later, really, when the feast came, on that day, 250,000 people came. During that day, it was one of the hottest days in a decade. To visit the wall. So my ideas, my thoughts were more turned to the practical implications, to the obligations that we had, and that saved me maybe from becoming too emotional.
Saved you?
I don't like emotionalism. And I think emotionalism with Jews is always dangerous. It leads to messianism and to all kinds of strange hopes that are not practical and that bring us only trouble.
What's your feeling about the Neturei Karta in your city?
They are an unimportant small community. They don't... They are behaving sillily. They try.
Do they pay taxes to the municipality?
Oh, sure. Everybody pays taxes.
Taxes is universal.
Taxes, everybody pays. We have a very small tax base because we have 1,300 prayer houses, synagogues and churches and monasteries and mosques. They all don't pay taxes. And we have 1,000 historical and archaeological sites that are freed of taxes. So, and comparative little industry. Now we are building up some industry the last year or two, and it's coming. But we are a very poor city with a poor tax base. But everybody pays taxes. We have a high tax morale.
In 1948, I believe that you were sitting somewhere around here trying to gather arms for the state of Israel.
That is true.
And you were part of the team that, well, I guess President Weizmann went over to Truman and asked him to recognize the state of Israel. Did you have any feeling whatsoever at that time the United States would not recognize Israel?
Well, I was sure the United States would eventually recognize Israel, that it would happen so quickly and so fast. That was Truman's greatness, I think, and we should never forget that in our historic memory. But here it was, he did it within minutes practically from the declaration of the state. And he at that time said, or a little later, when you have elections, I won't only give you de facto recognition, but also the jury recognition, and will appoint an embassy, and will give you loans and various other things, and he did.
Do you have any feelings about the United States establishing its embassy in Jerusalem? Do you have feelings about that? Non-emotional.
No, I think the embassy should be established in Jerusalem. I'm all against propagandizing for it. Whenever the Senate took a decision for it, and it didn't come about, it only proved how strong the blackmailing power of the Arabs was. So every time our best friend Moynihan comes and suggests it should move to Jerusalem, and the whole Senate and the whole House of Representatives vote for it, and it doesn't happen, it only shows the strengths of the Arabs, and it only weakens us. So I think one should not particularly demand it, because it wouldn't happen at this time.
It usually happens every time there's a Senate race in New York. Everybody makes outcries about the embassies in Jerusalem, and it goes on.
As I think, for instance, one shouldn't run after the Vatican. Why are there all kinds of Jewish delegations always going to the Vatican in order to see the Pope and ask him to recognize Jerusalem? What does it really matter to us? It's their business. And if they don't do it, it's their loss and not our loss. And we don't need it. And it won't happen because all these Jews run there. It's demeaning and unnecessary.
No quarrel with me. I've never been to the Vatican. I don't have any intention of going there.
But you know what I mean.
Absolutely. I agree with you 100%. I think that you can stand on your own 2 feet, and that anybody who does use this is really propaganda. They're taking advantage of a situation, and
I tell you what we have to do.
I'm repugnant to it.
I tell you what we have to do. We are the sovereign there. This is our capital. We have to behave towards minorities as we would like the whole world everywhere to behave towards Jews. That means we have to treat them decently, we have to take into account what their needs are, and go to the utmost to behave towards them in the best possible manner. And we try to do that. Not always so successful, sometimes we make mistakes, but on the whole we do it, and the Arabs can't say that. But the Christians, if you speak to them, certainly say, look, never were the holy places as well taken care of as they are today, not under the British, not under the Turks before that, not under the Jordanians after that. It's exemplary. That doesn't mean that it has an effect on the Vatican. You can wait for that. No harm done.
Teddy, can you explain something to me? I work with Jimmy Carter on the Camp David business, and I'm fairly friendly with President Carter. He told me the most fascinating city he had ever visited in his life was Jerusalem, and the sense of religious serenity he had there, he couldn't get any other place. And I've heard this from numerous people, but Carter is a very religious man. What is it that brings this feeling out in Jerusalem?
It's a combination of many things. It's the clarity of the sky. And we take care of that. We don't have a single industrial chimney permitted
your
in
architecture
Jerusalem.
is all...
The architecture is all stone. And we have taken care of good architecture. We have taken care of the holy places. They are today in a much better shape. The Christian holy places, the Muslim holy places, are in a much better shape than they were ever before. And there is a serenity. You know, if you take Jewish holidays, the greatest holiday is Yom Kippur. Not a car is moving, everything is quiet, and it's done without a law. All these ideas that you have to have laws to preserve the Sabbath, and you have laws to preserve the Yom Kippur, and you have laws not to eat bread on Pesach, is silly. I think religion is a moral force, and it shouldn't be enforced by legal means. That's only counterproductive. But you have that feeling in Jerusalem on a Friday afternoon. The traffic practically stops. So, all right, so a car is driving here or there, but you feel the difference between the morning and the afternoon of that day and the next Sabbath. And you see that even people who are not religious at all, and I'm not particularly religious myself, but the Sabbath is a Sabbath, and you honor it, and you take it into consideration. The fight of the religious and the ultra-religious to enforce legally all kinds of things which are details, which have no moral force, but only in order to show that the religion rules here, is counterproductive to real religious feelings.
We'll be back in a minute after a commercial break to continue this fascinating conversation with this fascinating individual who tells me I'm telling too many things about him that are good, but I'll take the chance.
In modern Middle East history, only one peace treaty has stood the test of time, the 1978 Camp David Accord. In the new documentary film, Backdoor Channels, The Price of Peace, learn the true story behind the greatest diplomatic achievement of our time and its lessons for the future.
The price of peace is very high to have this courageous man and my close friend killed.
Winner of the Telly Award for Best Cultural Program. Now available at select stores including Barnes & Noble and online at Amazon.com. Now get the book the hit movie was based on, Leon Charney's Backdoor Channels. Learn about the Backdoor Channel negotiations that led to the historic 1978 Israeli-Egyptian peace treaty. Become a witness to history and order Backdoor Channels online at Amazon or Barnes & Noble. Also available at all other retailers and booksellers. Or download the audiobook at iTunes or Audible.com. Relive history. Order Backdoor Channels. Get best-selling author Leon Charney's latest book, The Battle of the Two Talmuds. Join Charney as he explores years of Jewish history to find out why and how Talmudic scholars and rabbis abandoned the Holy Land for the lands of the diaspora. Learn about the power struggles behind the creation of the Jerusalem and Babylonian Talmuds. It's a book critics call engaging and enlightening. A book which will be of interest to people of every faith. Now available at Amazon and Barnes & Noble, or download the audiobook of The Battle of the Two Talmuds at iTunes or Audible.com. Leon Charney sets out to discover the true meaning of the Kaddish, the Jewish custom of reciting a prayer to commemorate the death of a close relative. Join Charney as he finds out the history of the Kaddish and how it has evolved. Reviewed as a refreshing walk through Jewish history and a book that deserves to be read by both Jews and non-Jews, The Mystery of the Kaddish is now available online at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and all other retailers and booksellers. Or download the audiobook at Audible.com or on iTunes. Discover The Mystery of the Kaddish. Available now over iTunes, Amazon, and Google Play. Leon Charney's cantorial CD and Disco Lam. Listen as Charney movingly sings El Mole Rachamim and Charney's amazing rendition of a disco remix of Adon Olam, all sung in the incredible and individual Charney style. Also listen to the CDs on Rhapsody. Download Leon Charney's cantorial songs and Disco Lam, the disco remix of Adon Olam on Amazon, iTunes, and Google Play. Or listen in on Rhapsody. All available now.
We're back. We're talking with Mayor Teddy Kollek of Jerusalem. I don't know anybody like him, and a lot of people in this world will agree with me. He may not, but that's his problem. Let him fight it with his wife. He's terrific. Teddy, a lot of funding has come from a thing called the Jerusalem Foundation, which is one of your pet projects, correct?
Yes, not a lot. Some. What do you call a lot?
A little.
It's not so little either. It's not a lot. What we would need is much, much more. We have today, for instance, a great deal of the absorption of the Russians is being financed by the Jerusalem Foundation in Jerusalem. And the results are obvious. We have 10 or 12% higher working force more in Jerusalem. Over 78% of the Russians are employed. In the rest of the country, it's 65%. We have better school attendance and better school acceptance, not only of the Russians, of the Ethiopians as well. We have a great deal of activities. For instance, we are now training 70 musicians as teachers. For this they have to know Hebrew, and they have to know teaching methods, and from the first of the school year, in every school you will have music lessons from grade 2 upwards, all by Russians. And it's financed for the next 3 years, partly by the Brahmans, partly by other people. We have theaters and a theater school and a film school. It is the only way of keeping this city of general culture, not only of religious culture. The religious culture is guaranteed. The general culture in Jerusalem isn't. It's to a very great extent the Jerusalem Foundation, although the Jerusalem Foundation has also built 40 synagogues out of gifts which they received. But without it, it would be much more difficult. And but it's not more than $12 or $15 million a year. It's not a tremendous amount of money.
So you could use more.
And how?
Anybody wants to help the Jerusalem Foundation, send a check to Mayor Teddy Kollek, Jerusalem. You don't even need an address. He'll get it, believe me. Just write down Jerusalem Foundation. All right, Teddy, let's talk about some really important things. Not that the Jerusalem Foundation is not important, but the peace process. Madrid, we were over in Madrid and we saw Yitzhak Shamir sitting across the table from the Syrian ambassador or Syrian foreign minister. Are you hopeful about what's happening now?
I think it all hinges now around the next elections. You have two different attitudes, basically. The one that here there is a promise by God to Abraham, and not an inch of the land will ever be given to the Arabs. They can live there, or they can, some say they cannot, they have to be transferred, but not an inch ever will be given to them to run. With this attitude, you won't get very far. And I don't think it is our need from point of view of security. I believe we should keep every bit of land that we need for our security. But all the rest, on that promise of God to Abraham, there was no dateline. And today, it means that money is being spent for safeguarding another piece of land here or there that should be spent on absorbing Russian Jews. And during the last few months, fewer Jews are coming because there are less possibilities for work than they had hoped for. And in Russia, apparently, the danger isn't so great. So it has gone down from 10 to 12,000 a month to about 5 to 6,000 a month. And this can be a permanent loss. And I think it's the greatest danger for us. The country has been created as a Zionist country, and Zionism means, first of all, a home for every Jew who wants to come and attract every Jew that you can only to Israel. This is our first and primary task, and nothing else. And everything else has to be subordinated to this. Everything else at the moment is subordinated to getting another piece of land on the West Bank, another piece of land in East Jerusalem, or another building or another shop. I think it's the wrong priority. And this will be decided in the next election, what the priorities will be. I am as anxious to have a large Israel as anybody else. But this isn't the point. We don't want to rule 1,700,000 Arabs. It will destroy us. It will not strengthen us. It's a wrong view. We have an example next door. Until 1920, you had a very strong Christian enclave in the Lebanon. Then came the French, and the Christians in Lebanon were also full of themselves, so they created the Grand Liban, the Greater Lebanon, and they included the Druzes and the Sunnis and the Shiites and everybody else. And in due course, those became the majority, and you see today the results. What's happening in the Lebanon is not our action there. We may have done some things we shouldn't, or we didn't, never mind. But at the moment we are only concerned with our own security, and therefore we keep a piece of the Lebanon which is as large as, I don't know, a little piece of Park Avenue outside
We
here.
were up there, we know.
Yeah. So it's of no real consequence geographically. But we are in danger that the same thing that happened to the Lebanese will happen to us if we suddenly have 1,700,000 Arabs. You cannot have a democratic country and keep these Arabs. Or you have no democratic country, or you have a democratic country and you keep the Arabs. The results are obvious, are foreseeable. It's a tragic misconception. I don't know whether this is your view or not, but when I have a chance to put my views forward, these they are. I think we should keep Jerusalem and Israel within those frontiers that we absolutely need, minimum, to guarantee our security. And that is much, much less than anybody in the present government perceives.
Teddy, when there was talk during the Camp David period of the Egyptian peace treaty, one of Sadat's people threw out an idea, and I'm just curious about your feeling about this. They said, we don't really want to have Jerusalem, we don't really want to have Jerusalem sliced up, but what we would like is maybe a flag, an Arab flag on a mosque.
Well, that is ancient history, and it's of no great importance today. Moshe Dayan at the time was willing to, was for giving them a flag on one of the mosques, but it's of no importance now. What they want now is Jerusalem practically divided, two capitals in one city. This will never happen. If you would have it, you would have the city divided by a wall in no time, because you would have two laws, two police forces, two customs directions, and in no time you would have the wall up again. It was a very sad city when it... Besides that, Jerusalem never was the capital of anybody else. In the year 1996, we'll celebrate 3,000 years of David the King having come to Jerusalem and made it the capital of his kingdom. And we'll commemorate this at the right time, in the right way. But nobody ever else, with the exception of the Crusaders for 80, 90 years, turned this into a capital. The Arabs didn't turn this into a capital when they could have. They started building Amman and neglected Jerusalem to the utmost. It was crumbling. There was no water there. There was nothing there, and no social welfare, no good schools. It was all in very, very bad shape when we took over. We had to invest a great deal to put the city into comparatively good shape. Not only that they destroyed 58 synagogues. Every civilization there always destroyed the previous civilization. The Romans destroyed our temple, and the Christians turned all the mosques into churches, and when the Muslims came back, they turned all the churches into mosques. And they destroyed 58 synagogues because that was the symbol of the previous regime that was us in the Jewish quarter for hundreds of years. We were the only ones who once did something else. We left them the Temple Mount. It wasn't easy, although the rabbis were all for it, and the rabbis thought one shouldn't get on the Temple Mount until the Messiah would come, and it was forbidden to tread there. But there were people who were of a different opinion. They still exist. Are of no great importance, but you have these faithful of the Temple Mount who all the time holler that we should take the Temple Mount. I think we did the right thing. It was one of the bases ever to come to peace. But there are people who think they should drive the Arabs out. They will never leave. The Christians will never leave. And to go there and to take a shop here and a shop there and say Jews are entitled to live everywhere. Of course Jews are entitled to live everywhere. The question is whether it's wise or not. Why don't they start out all these very famous and liberal Jews that are fighting for something, why don't they start out by living in Mea Shorim amongst the Neturei Karta, whom you mentioned before? Nobody is penetrating there. We shall not conquer the city that way. We have to treat, as I said before, we have to treat as the sovereign to whom this belongs and who can decide on the laws of this. We have to treat minorities as we want Jews to be treated all over the world.
Teddy, you're very, very well liked by a lot of Israeli Arabs who do live in Jerusalem. Do you, well, we've checked, we've been around a little bit. Do you think that most of the Israeli Arabs care if Jerusalem is their capital or not? The Israeli Arabs?
No.
Or is it coming out of Tunis and all these other
It's
people?
coming out of Tunis and out of some groups here. It's like our faithful of the Temple Mount, you know, you have such groups everywhere. But they didn't demand this thing. They could have done it until '67 if they would have felt strongly over it. It's a newfangled thing in order to put another difficulty into the peace treaty. There are, though, in the peace process, there are some people who think the only way to do is to do away with Israel altogether. They still exist. We shouldn't exaggerate the peaceful intentions of the Arabs, whoever they are, not of Egypt and not of anybody else. They'll get accustomed to us. It's a long pull, but we have to know that it isn't an easy job.
In modern Middle East history, only one peace treaty has stood the test of time, the 1978 Camp David Accord. In the new documentary film, Backdoor Channels, The Price of Peace, learn the true story behind the greatest diplomatic achievement of our time and its lessons for the future.
The price of peace is very high. To have this courageous man and my close friend killed.
Winner of the Telly Award for Best Cultural Program. Now available at select stores including Barnes & Noble and online at Amazon.com. Now get the book the hit movie was based on, Leon Charney's Backdoor Channels. Learn about the backdoor channel negotiations that led to the historic 1978 Israeli-Egyptian peace treaty. Become a witness to history and order Backdoor Channels online at Amazon or Barnes & Noble. Also available at all other retailers and booksellers. Or download the audiobook at iTunes or Audible.com. Relive history. Order Backdoor Channels. Get best-selling author Leon Charney's latest book, The Battle of the Two Talmuds. Join Charney as he explores years of Jewish history to find out why and how Talmudic scholars and rabbis abandoned the Holy Land for the lands of the diaspora. Learn about the power struggles behind the creation of the Jerusalem and Babylonian Talmuds. It's a book critics call engaging and enlightening. A book which will be of interest to people of every faith. Now available at Amazon and Barnes & Noble, or download the audiobook of The Battle of the Two Talmuds at iTunes or Audible.com. Leon Charney sets out to discover the true meaning of the Kaddish, the Jewish custom of reciting a prayer to commemorate the death of a close relative. Join Charney as he finds out the history of the Kaddish and how it has evolved. Reviewed as a refreshing walk through Jewish history and a book that deserves to be read by both Jews and non-Jews, The Mystery of the Kaddish is now available online at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and all other retailers and booksellers. Or download the audiobook at Audible.com or on iTunes. Discover The Mystery of the Kaddish. Available now over iTunes, Amazon, and Google Play. Leon Charney's cantorial CD and Disco Lam. Listen as Charney movingly sings El Molei Rachamim and Charney's amazing rendition of a disco remix of Adon Olam, all sung in the incredible and individual Charney style. Also listen to the CDs on Rhapsody. Download Leon Charney's cantorial songs and Disco Lam, the disco remix of Adon Olam on Amazon, iTunes, and Google Play. Or listen in on Rhapsody. All available now.
Is there any civil rights that are not accorded to Arabs who live in Jerusalem?
Is there any?
Civil rights. Do they have all civil rights that every citizen of Jerusalem, whether he be an Arab, a Christian, a Muslim, or a Jew, does he have the same civil rights?
Under the law, they have the same civil rights. They are not accustomed to the law. They're not making the best use of it. You have many Arabs who go to court also against the government and against the mistreatment by a policeman and so, and very often the courts decide in their favor. And sometimes they go only to court because they want to show off towards their neighbors what heroes they are. But You know, you have a certain amount of terrorism. A policeman is being attacked, and the policeman gets a stone thrown from a roof. And his friends get excited over this. It is nothing in comparison what we saw yesterday or day before yesterday in Los Angeles, or what you sometimes hear that exists in other cities in this country where the police behaves with great force, to use a modest word, against the population. There, of course, it goes together with the problem that you have here as well. If a white policeman badly treats a black, and if there an Israel policeman or a Druze policeman treats roughly an Arab, it's a great story. And you have enough civil rights Jews who fight battles instead of fighting for the rights of the Kurds who are gassed in Iraq, and for the few Jews who were badly treated in Syria, and I don't know what else. They are very worried about what will happen to the Arabs. The Arabs can take care of themselves, and while there may be here or there something that I would better wish it shouldn't, it's on the whole a very reasonable situation. It is not so on the West Bank. On the West Bank there is some tough dealing, and our problem is in Jerusalem that the West Bank is throwing a shadow on Jerusalem. So if you hear about something tough happening on the West Bank, here some stones were thrown, the soldiers reacted, in the end they had to shoot because they were attacked and somebody was killed. The frontier is not so far away, and people who sit on Park Avenue think it's happening in Jerusalem. It isn't. In Jerusalem, on the whole, civil liberties are observed, the courts are good for everybody, not everybody makes use of them.
It's a very interesting point. Very few people understand that the law is open, but a lot of people don't know how to use it. It's somewhat akin to the blacks, by the way, in the South years ago, who really had the process open, but they also did not know how to use it.
You see, here you have another point. There was never such a law in an Arab country. They are accustomed to judges being appointed by the king or by the dictator, and therefore only doing what the king or dictator wants. They are not accustomed.
That's very interesting.
They are not accustomed to our way of justice. They are not accustomed to democracy. Even if they know that democracy means voting once every 4 or 5 years, it isn't only that. Democracy means compromise, and democracy means taking on responsibility, and they are far away from this. It needs education, not only with the Arabs, also with a great number of the Jews who come from Afghanistan and from Morocco, and so gradually you make progress. But they also didn't know what democracy was.
It's very true. There was a great trial in Israel one time with a minister who was in a bribery scandal. We won't mention his name. And one of the defenses he used was, that's what I was taught in my country. You know, this is the modus vivendi. This is the way we operated. The truth is, there are no Arab democracies.
It wasn't bribery. It was something else, and that happens still today. That you do things for your family and for your immediate surroundings, and that is the priority, and not the country or the city or the state or so. And your responsibility for the clan and for the wider family, do special things for them. This is a thing that is inherited.
It's a cultural thing.
And it's a different kind of culture.
Teddy, we were in Israel when the Scuds were coming over, basically in Tel Aviv, and we interviewed Chich.
Basically in Ramat Gan, but also in Tel Aviv.
Right. The feeling was Jerusalem is not going to be hit because of all the holy sites were there. Was that your feeling too, or you didn't believe that?
Well, I didn't believe it because we believed that also in '67. That nothing would happen, and then suddenly the bombardment started and people were killed in the streets, and children had to stay in school for a day or 2 or 3 until they could go home. So it is not a perfect guarantee. I think there is a hesitation of doing something in Jerusalem, but there is no such guarantee.
Teddy, what does the next 25 years look like? What does it look like in the future?
Rosy.
Rosy.
Yeah. I tell you,
Billy Rosy too, huh? He did a lot for Jerusalem, didn't he? Gave you a museum?
Certainly gave us his collection of sculptures, and he built the Rose Garden together with a great artist, a great person, Noguchi. We have today the best schools in the country and the best technical schools in the country, and we have today a city that is well built. We have built a cultural background. We have increased by far the religious schools as well. The tension between the religious and less religious has to a very great extent evaporated. We're building a city hall finally for 570,000 people that we are today, of 560,000. And we build great shopping centers and industrial parks and various other things, and industries coming there. It's all a slow process. Fields, you know, we are a very, very differential, very multicultural city. We have Jews from 104 different cultural backgrounds. Today you have a museum, and it's one of the great museums that has been created in the world over the last period since World War, since 45. And you have a symphony orchestra, and you have various other things, a film school and a theater school, all financed by the Jerusalem Foundation, and all in danger that tomorrow it may not continue if you don't get enough funding for it. So here you are. I believe on that basis we can now attract industry. We have proven that some of the industry, because of this, already came to Jerusalem, and particularly in the recent past. Small factories here or there. We, as I said before, we have absorbed slightly more Russians than our share, and we have absorbed them slightly better than anywhere else. It will be a good city. It's today a very good city. It will be an even better city.
Teddy, great to see you. There you have it, one-on-one with Teddy Kollek. As I said in the beginning of the show, he's irrepressible, he's tenacious, he's a great builder. He's one of the true heroes of Israel. He's a great man.